wiring fraud today. We're really excited to have Mann, McGibney, and Jordan be one of our major sponsors this year. And so I'm going to turn the meeting over to Maggie Davis.
Hi, everybody. I am sorry, Ashley asked me for a little bio blurb and I totally failed to give it to her. But I definitely see some familiar faces and names here. I've been in the Hillsborough, Chapel Hill, Durham area for 9 years, my whole practice. Most of that doing real estate and representing clients in transactional things, trying to stay out of the courtroom mostly. But now with Mann, McGibney, and Jordan for the last couple of years, really just focusing on real estate and making sure that we have just really great residential closings, smooth, clear title, easy loan closings, all that stuff. It's a really great team and we have a lot of fun. But without further ado, I'm going to talk about some really depressing stuff. Wire fraud. And I'm going to share a screen and show you my nerdy PowerPoint loving self. So here we go. Oh wait, there's my slideshow. Okay, so wire fraud, I think we all know what it is, but I'm really just going to kind of get the who, what, when, where. So who commits wire fraud? Criminals, you knew that. Where they are and what they look like is not actually something we know. They are really all over the world. You know, internally within our firm, we always joke it's the Russians, right? But that's really just our vernacular for anyone who is trying to target us or our clients. So who are the victims of wire fraud? Anyone sending or receiving wires, right? So our buyers who are sending wires, their cash to close for closing, sellers who are trying to receive their funds, and law offices and lenders because we're always sending wires. And who is targeted for wire fraud? That's actually even bigger than who is a victim because it's anyone sending emails related to a closing transaction. Obviously that includes you. And yes, it is a little bit my goal today to scare you. If you weren't scared already, but you know. So then I know I'm really doing the basics, and so if you guys want to chime in, like let me know, but it's one of the things that I find is that kind of we talk about wire fraud, but like what is it? like what are we so scared of? Because once we understand that, we actually know how to protect ourselves or try, and more importantly, protect our clients, particularly from your perspectives. So wire fraud is someone stealing wire instructions, changing them, and therefore diverting money to their own account. So they're not grabbing the wire midstream, right? It's not like someone, like I send a wire, I have entered all the information correctly, and yet it gets diverted. That's not wire fraud. There's a lot of federal protections. There's an entire agency on how, like, that runs wires. It's the Fed. But it's really before that. It's with those instructions. And of course it is trickery and fraud, and it's a federal crime. We have had one client actually lose money. I was thinking about this last night to try to give you the scope of how this and kind of our business. We probably send between $3 and $7 million in wires every day. That's what we send That doesn't include what we receive. It is purely, we send $3 to $7 million in wires every day. And we receive probably an equal amount. We have once in our firm's 7-year history had a client lose money. That was because a loan officer took our wiring instructions. I'm looking at you, Chris Holt. It was not Chris Holt. It would never be Chris Holt, but he's the only loan officer on the call. But this other person who is not Chris Holt, emailed wiring instructions to a buyer. The buyer never called us. The buyer received an email from Mann, McGibney, and Jordan at gmail.com, or it was some ridiculous thing. He then proceeded, this 26-year-old guy proceeded to wire 6 figures, never confirmed it, got to closing 4 days later, and we didn't have his money. So that day, when our entire firm, well, Chris Mann and, the whole firm was on pins and needles, right? And when we had to call the FBI and have the police in our office, that's never a good day. That is not a good day for anyone. So yeah, it's a federal crime because it's money crossing state lines, so the FBI gets involved. So how is wire fraud committed? Emails are monitored by criminals and the documents are switched and then nobody double checks. So that's exactly the situation I just described with our one client. So what happens is these criminals who are trying to get this money know who sends wires, right? They know who sends wiring instructions, forgive me. They know that real estate agents are involved in transactions where money gets moved around. They know that real estate attorneys are involved in transactions where money gets moved around. Loan officers, lenders, the same thing. So emails are monitored. What does that mean? When TRID came down, the way it was described to me, which was fairly shocking to me, is that emails are a lot like postcards sent through the ether, right? So like you're sending this information out there and anybody who's looking could see it and read it. We're going to talk in a little while about how to maybe at least put your emails in an envelope, if you will, more like a letter instead of a postcard. But so criminals are out there figuring out who is sending these emails that has information, who is involved in transactions where money is moving hands. And then they see somebody send wiring instructions and they grab those wiring instructions. They take that information off of the virtual postcard, which is your email or our email or anyone's email, and they change it. We had a number of clients targeted who it was on our letterhead. It looked almost exactly the same. It was just that the bank account information was different. And so that's what the documents are switched. It was, like I said, it was our letter. It looked exactly the same. It used to be that they weren't as sophisticated and it would be so clearly, you know, send your money to the prince in Nigeria sort of thing, that our clients weren't as easily tricked, but they are very sophisticated. It looks like it's coming from us. And then of course, and you're going to hear me say we've had clients targeted because they have received faulty wiring instructions. But we do our very, very best to scare our clients about wires. And so we often get emails and calls, hey, I got these wiring instructions. Was I supposed to get those? 9 times out of 10, no, right? I mean, like, if you're having to ask me, then no, you were not supposed to get those and you were right to call. So if somebody doesn't double check and they're like, oh, I guess Mann, McGibney, and Jordan, their bank is having trouble, so I'm not sending this to Town Bank, I'm sending it to Bank of America. Okay, no problem. No, 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 of course, that's an enormous problem. And if they had double checked, they would have known. In my screen sharing, I can't see if there are any comments. Are there any comments? Somebody holler at me if there are comments. Okay, so what are the red flags we're looking for with regards to wire fraud? One is any change at all in wiring instructions mid-transaction. Oh, I did mean to show, and maybe I can pull this up later and share it with you all, or maybe you've seen it before. Our buyer engagement letter has an entire page on wire fraud and wiring instructions. And one of the things it says is, we will never send you our wiring instructions. We will never send them to you out of the blue. If someone is sending you wiring instructions, or sending you new wiring instructions, or sending instructions that say, oh, I told you to bring a check yesterday or last week or last month, but now I'm telling you to send a wire, here are the instructions. No, absolutely not. I don't mean to laugh, but that is a hard no. Any sort of communication in that vein should be a huge red flag. And the other one that's a little harder to spot is the weird email addresses. So like abc123@gmail.com, but when it pops up, it shows Allison Murray, MMJ, but then if you actually read the rest of the email address, clearly it's not from us. Or the subject line is spot on. But remember, emails are like postcards. So the criminals who are out there and monitoring know that an Allison Murray works here. They know that we abbreviate to MMJ. They know the subject line of whatever emails have been sent. So none of those things are dispositive. Oh, I just figured out how to see chat. Okay. Jennifer, in my business, I will not be involved in anything wire related. The buyer selling must deal directly with the attorney, no exceptions. With my need to provide exception, yes. Yes, I'm definitely getting to that, Jennifer. I think in general, for real estate agents and anyone who is not actually receiving the instructions, or excuse me, actually needing to send or receive a wire, those instructions should never be part of an email that you send. I think it's a hard and fast rule that should be generally abided by. But I also think helping clients understand what we're concerned about and why is really important. I mean, obviously you guys wouldn't be here if you didn't think so. So what to tell your clients when red flags appear. Because I'll be honest, again, it's really like 7 or 8 times out of 10, if a client is targeted and does get those fraudulent wire instructions, they don't call us, they call you guys, right? You're the ones they're texting at 9 o'clock at night when they're getting sticker shock, you know, from the offer to purchase they just went on. You guys are the ones that are, you know, really holding their hands through this amazingly difficult and stressful situation. So you're the ones that are going to call. So when we do have these red flags, which really there aren't that many red flags, I tried to think of other ones, but really the upshot is any change mid-transaction, any change. Call first to confirm the instructions. And this is an interesting one. Add a phone number that is totally independent of the email with the wiring instructions, right? if I'm a fraudster and I was able to take a PDF, first of all, I love the word fraudster. I'm going to be using it more. But if I had a PDF and I was able to take this law firm's or lenders or whomever's wiring instructions and fool you, who's no big dummy, into thinking these are my new wiring instructions, why wouldn't I give you a callback number that is mine and not the law firm's? And when you call, why wouldn't I say, Mann, McGibney, and Jordan, right? Like, it sounds silly, or it sounds obvious, but it's kind of not, right? Because we call the number that's most in front of us. So if your client contacts you and says, boy, I just got these weird wiring instructions, what's up? Why don't you give them the number they're supposed to confirm with, right? Why don't you say, oh, here's Mann McGibney's number, call them, right? Because that's totally independent of that email that was just received. And yeah, really just calling and confirming and asking to speak with a person whose name you know is always a good one. But one of the ones that I really love is if we have instilled sufficient anxiety into clients and they're supposed to send us 90,000, 50,000, whatever their cash to close is, and I know wires cost money, but if they are as anxious and they have any concern, try sending $100 first. This is something that the Morgan Stanleys and the Vanguards and anybody who is pulling money out of a brokerage account to wire for cash to close, they will send a small tester wire, confirm we've received it, and then send us the big wire. Again, maybe it's not worth it if the client's wiring 25,000 and their bank is charging them $50 a wire. Okay, I get it. But then just make sure that they're calling and confirming with the correct people. Okay, I've got another, do I have another chat? Chris, we address wire fraud 3 to 4 times during the loan process, but reinforcement from all sides is really important. That's right. Are there any acceptable alternatives to wiring? Yeah, checks. I'm gonna get to that. I will say, oh, whoops. Not all law firms accept checks, but we'll get there in a minute. So how do we prevent wire fraud? Treat emails like they're evil. And I said, just kidding, but not. Because I'm not. Like I said, if what we're doing in our lives is sending emails back and forth, we have to assume everybody's reading them like postcards, right? So if you don't recognize it, it's probably the Russians, so don't click on it, right? And this is to Jennifer's point earlier, never, ever email your client's wiring instructions. That should be up to whoever is receiving the wire. Even internally within our firm, some of us cannot email wiring instructions to clients because we only send them encrypted, which is what I'm going to get to in a minute. 40% with cash buyers, about 40% of transactions in this market, realtors are the only ones. Yeah, well, that's a good point. If there isn't a lender, it's up to the agents. That's definitely true. Okay, let's see. What else do I? Lock down your email. So this is what if we're doing all this communicating via postcard, maybe we don't want to be doing that. And software that encrypts emails is available. And that is really kind of the envelope around the postcard, if you will. And I'm sorry, I didn't research the different services that are provided, but there are a billion of them out there. Sometimes it means your email is delivered with a link that kind of looks like the Russians. And so you have to be careful about that. But sometimes the encryption software just makes sure that there is a secure pathway. And if there's not, then there's a link. And so it's a balance. It's a balance figuring out how to encrypt your email. Double authentication. So this is one, we discovered a group of clients that had received faulty wiring instructions. And around that time, we instituted something called double authentication. So not only do I have to log in with a password for my email every morning, somebody receives a text message. We have group emails. So I have my email, and if I'm logging into that one, then I get the text message. And then so I have to enter not only the password, but I also have to enter whatever the code is that I'm texted when I log in. So not only do you have to know my password, you have to be sitting in front of my cell phone in order to get into my email. And we're going to talk about how that helps in a minute. And yeah, that's what double authentication is. And then encryption, like I was saying, I can't even send wiring instructions willy-nilly to clients because we only send them encrypted, and only certain people within our office send encrypted emails. But the third way to lock down your email is checking your rules and forwarding regularly. I do not claim to be an IT genius. So this is something that I learned when I started working here at Mann, McGibney, and Jordan. The reason the double authentication is important is, like I said, the criminals who are trying to get our wiring instructions know who to target. And so what makes it even easier is if they could just go ahead and get all my emails, right? They don't have to be out in the ether trying to catch them. They just get all of my emails. So if they can figure out my password, they can log into my email and set up a rule that all of my emails are forwarded to them. And then they can monitor my emails, figure out who a buyer is, and then send them fraudulent wiring instructions, right? Yeah, that's a lot of effort, but we're also talking about a lot of money, as you all know. If I've got a cash buyer who's buying a $600,000 house, boy, that pays off pretty quickly, right? For the criminal, if they get the wire. So here at Mann, McGibney, and Jordan, we've got the double authentication, but we go in every few weeks, each of us, to every single email box in our law firm, used by our law firm, and we make sure that there are no rules or forwarding in place that we did not create. Are there any questions about that? Does that make sense? Do you guys know what I'm talking about when I say rules and forwarding, right? Somebody can put it in the chat if people don't understand or want more clarification. And the third thing we can do to prevent wire fraud is scare the socks off our clients. Never wire funds without checking with the recipient first. I cannot say that enough times. And again, that phone number needs to be independent of the email, where like the phone number you call to confirm needs to be independent of the email that you receive the wires. And this sounds really funny, but sellers need to be patient when we send wires. We were trying to send a wire for $1.2 million in proceeds to a gentleman who just flat out yelled at us that we were wasting his time. We were trying to confirm the wiring instructions. And I mean, I laugh because I'm like, well, do you want me to make sure I'm sending this to the right place or not? It's your money. But so with sellers, if they could be patient, Rain, I see your question. I'm going to come back to it in 1 minute. The way we receive internally, we receive wiring instructions. If someone says to me, oh, can I just email that to you? Yeah, but you're going to have some steps that are going to be required to confirm that what you emailed to me is correct. I've been framing all of this about emails that I'm sending and our buyers getting incorrect wiring instructions, but we receive incorrect wiring instructions too, right? Somebody sending us this saying, oh, I told you to FedEx my check, but I really want it wired. Here are my instructions. Yeah, no, we're not doing that. So what we do, we have 2 ways that we confirm we have the right wiring instructions. One is I will take a voided check from the actual seller. Like when somebody comes in to sign their seller documents, I will receive a voided check from them. And we have ways internally that we mark the check as voided, say who received it, and that they check their identity. I mean, if I'm notarizing the seller docs, it's all easy. Sellers don't know that I'm like double checking their identity. But, right, that's step 1 way we do it. The other way we do it is if somebody wants to email us, or if they want to send a voided check with their seller documents that some other person drops off or whatnot, we have a program, a software called Certified ID. And what that is we pay for it per user or per time we use it. But if what we do is we enter all the information we've received, we send it to the seller confirms it or sends us corrections, but let's just assume it's correct. They send it back to us and it is confirmed by the seller through this Certified ID system. Once we have that, we know we have the wiring instructions and we wire based on whatever was sent to us. So let's say a seller lives in Germany. They really do want to email us wiring instructions. Fine, we're going to send it in that. They're going to receive a Certified ID and they can confirm their wiring instructions in that way. The really cool thing about Certified ID is if wiring instructions are confirmed and correct in that system, we have insurance up to, I believe it's $1 million per wire. So if somehow those confirmed wiring instructions were really not real, the seller and their proceeds are protected. And frankly, us, it's not a joke. I was tempted to call it a joke, but kind of the tongue-in-cheek way that we lawyers talk about our trust account is that it's our client's money while it's in the account and it has to be managed that way. But as soon as it's lost and gone, then it's our money, right? So for Certified ID, it really helps protect us and the sellers. Rain's question is, are personal emails more easily hacked than corporate emails or not necessarily? I said previously, I'm no IT genius, but I do believe that it is easier to encrypt or protect corporate emails, but I am not 100% sure on that. If anybody knows more on that, I have only tried to encrypt my corporate emails, right? I've only ever put encryption software on my corporate emails. I've never done it on my Gmail. And I know that when encryption software sends information to the Yahoos, the Hotmails, the AOLs, the Gmails of the world, they are not usually received in a secure manner, and that's when you get the link. So it's always been my assumption that that means they're not as safe. Like I said earlier, I know Chris Holt, and I feel like Chris Holt is a better tech guru than I am. So if Chris or anybody else has more insight, I'm not insulted if you jump on and say something. But I'm gonna keep going until Oh, the other way to prevent wire fraud is to use checks for payment and receiving proceeds. If a seller is worried and they don't want to do a certify ID or they're at all too nervous, receive a check. I mean, the downside of the check is somebody has to pick it up or it has to be FedExed. And the bank, and depending on the size of the check, the bank is going to hold the funds, even though attorney's funds are, you know, as good as a cashier's check under Good Funds Act. But you know, it definitely eliminates the possibility of wire fraud if there's no wire. And we as a firm also accept checks. I know a lot of firms don't because there's a risk of fraudulent checks, right? There's fraud everywhere. But we made an internal decision that we felt better prepared to see and deflect fraudulent checks better than we can see wire fraudsters out there. So, this just happened last week. We got a check, FedEx, the return address was Canada, for an address that we don't have on our books. And then all of a sudden we start getting these calls from a gentleman who is very distressed because they're terminating the contract, quote unquote, and they want their earnest money back, right? That has red flags all over it. But that person had to call us. Like, there were just so many things that they had to do. And we were able to wait until the check cleared our account, which it didn't, and then tell them no, that it was clearly a fraudulent check. So I know that not every law firm came down to that same decision, but for us, we felt it was easier to detect a fraudulent check than it was not, and so we accept cashier's checks for closings. Now, oh wait, Chris Holt. I can't answer whether or not it's easier to hack personal versus corporate, but I can say I've seen many spoofed emails from corporate accounts, including both my prior and current company, with multiple business partners for other businesses. It doesn't take a lot for someone to spoof an account. All they need is to know what your email address and make an imitation of it. That's true. Right. So I will say there's spoofing, but there's also like actually accessing the contents, right? And I don't know, I think in terms of the double authentication and that sort of thing, I think you can get that can be done in your personal email as well. Okay, what to do if wire fraud happens? Call the sending bank as soon as possible. That is the very first call that has to be made. Before calling anyone else, call the bank, call the sender's bank. So let's assume it's our buyer. They're at Bank of America, they sent it, they call you or whatever. We discover for some reason in the process that was sent to a fraudulent place, you call the bank. We actually had this happen. We had a buyer, I actually think it was Bank of America. He did things in reverse order. He sent the wire and then he called our law firm to confirm them, and they were fraudulent. And somehow in our phone tree, he actually got Chris Mann on the phone. We call him IT Chris when he's not being lawyer Chris, because he is actually a software engineer prior to going to law school. So he's our IT guy as well. But anyway, so he's confirming with this buyer and he's like, no, those are wrong. I'm not being rude. I'm hanging up on you and you're calling your bank and you're canceling that wire. So within, I think it was less than an hour of sending the wire, he called us to confirm they were wrong. He called his bank back and they were able to grab it. time is of the essence. If a fraudulent wire happens, every minute that ticks by makes it less likely that the sender is getting their money back. Then you can call the victim and the recipient, right? I mean, well, to be honest, you discover that your buyer sends a fraudulent wire. You can't call Bank of America on their behalf. Bank of America doesn't want to talk to you. They only want to talk to their client. So really, if it happens, the sender should call their sending bank ASAP. And then basically everybody in the transaction needs to know. And that really is less about getting the money back and more about figuring out where the gap is, where the hole is, and how these wiring instructions got out. Any time internally we hear, and with the volume of wires we send, I'm feeling a little embarrassed saying, kind of giving these examples, because I feel like it sounds like we don't do what we're supposed to do. But really, they should be examples of how we stopped crime, how we protected our clients. Because with the volume of wires that we send and receive, we've only ever had one client have actual loss. And that was because, I mean, he really, the instructions didn't come from us. He didn't confirm them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, and that still keeps many of us up at night. But we do get targeted and we do stop it. And we are an obvious target given our volume. But we all need to know. So when this happens, when we hear about this, is every single person in our law firm stops what we're doing and checks our email. Make sure there's no forwarding, make sure we have the double authentication in place, you know, computers get screened, everything. So whoever the recipient of the wire was supposed to be, you got to find that hole, and you need to find it fast, because if there's one victim, there's probably more victims to be had. Jennifer, I see your thing on two-factor authentication. What do you mean is missing leads? You can still get into your email. It's just a two-step process instead of one. I can't unmute you. Can somebody else unmute you?
Hey, thank you. Hey, what I'm saying basically is, when you're trying to help someone who has 11,000 realtors in the triangle to choose from, just giving them any reason not to get in touch with you could shut it down if they get irritated with the two-factor authentication, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, no, they don't see two-factor authentication. That's just you.
Oh, I misunderstood. Thank you for clarifying. So sorry.
Yeah, no. It's when you log into your email.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I understand now.
Sure. Yeah. Now the encryption would cause potential trouble with leads, right? If all their emails from you come back as a link that then they have to log into a portal in order to get the secure email, two thumbs down.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. But if you're not sending wiring instructions, you probably don't need to encrypt, right?
Okay. Yeah, that's how I feel, is just get rid of the whole process, get my hands off of it.
Yes, and I think that is extremely wise, and I think that is what should happen. But I do think that the double authentication also isn't a bad thing.
Yeah, I agree. Now that you explained it.
My email, right? Jessica, I receive fraudulent emails about closings at least once a month. I do not answer these and do not even open them. Right, and that, so the fraudulent emails with the, again, forgive me if somebody is Russian, but it's just our vernacular, right? Whoever the fraudster is trying to get into your email or trying to get a backdoor into your computer, a backdoor into your email, so they can set up those rules so they can then be easily monitoring your email, right? And so that's what the double authentication stops or helps stop. And you are 100% correct. Don't answer them and don't even open them because you don't want to open the back door, right? So yes. So once the sending bank has been called, you got to call the FBI. And there's even a person here. I'm going to give you her information as well. Oh, I'm totally going to let Garrett tell us about SIM swap scam. Oh, or we can Google it. Like I said, the FBI is involved in trying to capture and trying to track down wire fraud and call the police because it's also a local crime. Also, 24 hours are critical. It is possible within the first 24 hours to get the money back. The way wires work is it goes through a central clearinghouse at the Fed. They get assigned a unique number, and then it goes on to the final destination. Those final destinations are always within the US, at least when it comes to wire transactions that attorneys send. We are not allowed to send international wires. It's a bar rule. That's another thing your clients who may be in Germany get frustrated with. We need them to have an account in the US. We are literally not allowed. I can send them a check in US dollars to Germany and they can do what they need to with it, but I cannot send a wire to an international account. And this is one of the reasons. But I send the wire, it goes to the Fed clearinghouse, gets assigned its number, and then proceeds on to its final destination. And like I said, all of those destinations are internal within the US, but how quickly can somebody then take money from their US account and get it overseas, at which point that money is gone. We are not getting that money back. Nobody's getting that money back. So it usually takes about 24 hours for that entire process to happen. And that's why the 24 hours are critical. We know it's been sent to the wrong place. We can figure out the Fed clearinghouse number, and then we can figure out the destination bank. Not we, this is the FBI. I have nothing to do with this. But then the FBI can track that and they can freeze the receiving account. If they freeze that receiving account before the money leaves, great. If it's after the money's gone, that money's gone. So I said it twice just to be very, very clear. The first 24 hours are critical. And there is no reason that anyone involved, even tangentially in wire fraud, should not cooperate, right? It's not, you know, if you accidentally sent wiring instructions, that's amazing amount of egg on your face. And yeah, there may be liability involved, but you absolutely have to cooperate 100%. Not that you guys wouldn't, but I just figured I'd emphasize it. And that's really what I had on wire fraud. If we want to unmute, oh wait, I want to put this up. This is her information. This is the local wire fraud expert with the FBI. Keep it, put it on speed dial, and hopefully you never have to use it. Now you guys are going to have to look at my mug again. I'm going to stop. There we go. So thoughts, questions? Boy, it's really crazy when everybody's on mute. It's a very, very quiet room.
I just made it to where everybody should be able to mute themselves.
Awesome, cool, thank you. What is the SIM card splitting, Garrett? Where's Garrett? I mean, the takeaway, oh, there he is. Tell us about it.
It's just very similar to email fraud. So it's someone impersonating you, calling your cell phone carrier, and basically saying, "I lost my cell phone. I need my SIM card stopped working," and then they basically get the SIM card and are able to basically participate in the two-factor authentication.
Wow. See, this is one of the issues with wire fraud, right? I mean, I really became aware of wire fraud. I don't know if it's because of TRID or kind of at the same time that TRID was being implemented. So about 5 years ago now, 6 years ago, and every time I learn something, it's something new, right? They found some next way. And that really is, I mean, every time you come in with technology and there's going to be the concern that that criminals are going to find the next technology to find a way around whatever protection we put in place. So it's a scary thing. So checks, bring us checks. Somebody's asking me for that last slide again. I'm gonna pull it back up. Oh wait, that's not. There you go.
Maggie?
Yeah. What's up?
Maggie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I had a situation in the last couple of weeks where actually I was dealing with another law firm, which, you know, one of the issues with us is, you know, a lot of times the buyer always chooses the law firm. So you have to know the policies of each particular law firm. And also, so anyway, regarding the whole wire thing, my seller wanted their funds wired to their investment account, and he was 87-year-old CPA. And so he was really peeved when we couldn't put in the instructions ourselves, or we wouldn't put in the instructions ourselves into the portal. And so I actually called the investment advisor, and they put the instructions in from the investment account. They took the responsibility. So, you know, he didn't like it, and I apologize many times for the fact that there are mean people in the world. But anyway, you know, it's just another example of the fact that we just have to set strong boundaries as realtors to protect ourselves.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. And like I said, it's always surprising to me when sellers get frustrated at the steps that we're taking to protect their money. But, you know, this is probably new for many people, and, you know, they don't live in this world where they're constantly paranoid about wires.
It was new, but there were $400,000 involved.
Right.
I wanted to interject also that I took the ePro class, which, you know, if anybody wants to delve into that a little bit more, the second half of that class and certification deals with cybersecurity, and a lot of that, of course, is the wire fraud issue, but a lot of other cybersecurity issues as well. And it scared me to death, to the point where when I speak with a client for the first time and we're going over our agency forms and everything, I disclose a lot of that to them from the very beginning, that this is what I do. My service is the real estate side, you know, and I don't want to get involved in things that might sacrifice or jeopardize their security in any way. And consequently, my policy, my personal policy and our office policy is that we don't want what we don't need. And we're not going to give information or get involved in that side of the transaction and business. And it's a safeguard that, you know, don't think we're not doing our job. We're doing our job to protect the client. So, you know, setting up those expectations up front, I think is extremely important. Just like, you know, we tell people, you know, here's the loan process. We don't give the loans and we don't get involved in the loans because, again, you know, that is the professional on the other side. I see Chris is raising his hand. Yes, absolutely. So, you know, this is all scary stuff. And I want my clients to understand, you know, when I am super busy and I get an email, I may not take that moment, even though I know better. It's just like if you're distracted and you're crossing the street, you may forget to look both ways. We don't want that to happen if we're having to be responsible for people's money. So it's my policy, not going to get involved.
Yep, I couldn't agree more.
Well, and I also think we need to be careful with protecting the other information. And most of the attorneys have gotten very good, but I know I'm amazed at the number of attorneys who still send seller information packages where they're asking for seller ID, seller social security numbers and stuff. And I tell my sellers, you know, I say, we add in there, you know, please contact the seller direct for this social security number, because I don't want to have that social security number. I don't want to email it back and forth. I don't want to have any of that, you know, I understand why attorneys need that, but I shouldn't be the one getting that information. So more and more that we're getting better about sending that information directly to sellers when they're asking for that seller information, or even that buyer information about social security numbers and stuff, which is, you know, part of some of the same issues.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, but I will say, I often wonder how sellers are going to respond to me, somebody they've never met, calling and asking for their social. So I definitely don't think it should be emailed, but the instruction might need to be that the seller should call us.
Right.
So that they're not getting a random call asking for their social, because that also shouldn't be their norm.
Yeah. Super.
I was just do you guys mind really quickly? I was going to show you our seller information, our buyer information form. Do you mind? I was going to.
Yeah, please.
I think it's funny. Well, it's not funny. Right here, read this whole thing. Put it on your fridge. Read it every day until you close. At some point during the process of buying your home, a scammer will attempt to trick you into wiring money to a fraudulent account. It will happen. Be careful. And I mean, our firm is just, we often take it, all of the attorneys in our firm take it as a compliment when somebody leaves or communicates with us and says, boy, that didn't feel like communicating with an attorney. So we try not to legalese things. And I feel like that's one of the reasons this wire fraud notice has actually been successful. Is like, put it on your fridge, read it, set an alarm, read it every day. And so I also think it's really important that we framed it as, this is actually going to happen. Not this may not happen, but you actually will. And I think that's one of the reasons we're successful is our buyers, or we're successful in terms of this, is our buyers look at it and go, oh gosh, like, okay. And so then they're very aware when they receive wiring instructions out of the blue. But then the really bad part, and this is true, and nobody wants to talk about this part, but is if they don't follow these instructions, it can't be our liability, right? And that's really money lost. And if you're wiring money for a real estate transaction, that's a lot of money. So, but anyways, put a reminder on your phone, reread this every day until closing. This is important. So, it's just, that's just we have a whole page. We try not to overwhelm people with our information sheets and engagement letters, but this one gets its whole own page, and it seems to have been very effective so far, and I'm knocking on wood. Okay.
Maggie, Elena made a comment that I want to underscore for a couple of reasons. She had said that, you know, she always sends the information sheet from the attorney to her client. And I think that that's a really important thing to bring to everyone's attention. For one thing, we are the intermediary. And, you know, very often we're the ones that, you know, help our clients find the attorney even. And so there's our value. And, you know, we do want to stay part of the process. We want to show what we're doing to help everybody and make this an easier process. So, you know, again, I think, and this is what I do as well, and I always make sure received the attorney's instructions or information letters or whatever it is. And I tell my clients as I forward it to them and CC the attorney, please return this to the attorney because I don't want to be privy to any confidential information that could be hacked by somebody who's monitoring my emails. I have no way of knowing until I find out. And so again, those hackers are out there and they're prevalent. And as I said, you know, I took that ePro class. It scared me to death. It is one of the most amazing things when you find out what they can do and how they can do it and how easy it is for them to get you. So, you know, sadly we live in that world, but let's help our clients. Let's help all of ourselves and still have value, bring that value to the whole process.
Yep, I agree. You guys do a great job in helping communicate and facilitate while also not getting too much information of specific kind of information. That's a real challenge.
Right.
Well, are there any other questions for Maggie?
No, this was excellent. Thank you so much, Maggie. I really appreciated this.
Thank you, guys. If anybody, call me anytime. I'm head of our title team these days. When I started here, we didn't have a title team, but now we're big enough that we need one. And so if you have any crazy title questions, I'm your gal. Give me a call. And if there's anything else, let me know.
Super. Well, we want to thank Maggie Davis of Mann, McGibney, and Jordan, who are one of our sponsors for OCHAR. And thank you for spending your time today. And once again, we recorded this. So if you know someone who didn't get a chance to be here today, it'll be available from OCHAR. So just let us know. I want to thank everybody for participating. Have a great day and try to stay dry. It looks like it's going to be wet today.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Maggie.